God, okay.
All right, you gotta turn this down.
Oh my god, dude. Okay. Okay.
So right off the bat, I don't think our reaction right now is what they were going for. I don't think
I
it
don't know.
succeeded at what it wanted to do.
I think it's funny. I try to appreciate things like in the moment, because especially like the 70s, or I guess it's early 80s, like maybe it was scary then. It might have been scary then. Like how graphics on games now, or back like when you first played the N64, you felt like those graphics were amazing, right? But maybe that's what I'm feeling, but oh my god. It was just it had. I don't know how. I think it got like what 80. I know we say Rotten Tomatoes, but didn't
it got a pretty high Letterboxd score?
This movie, I don't know why. I mean, I'm not saying it did anything. It didn't do anything right. Besides, like I think the one thing I liked was the visuals and the sound, even if it didn't make sense. But the very beginning of it, it goes he doesn't change very much. Like even over the course of 15 years or however long you see his life, he's the same guy, and he doesn't learn anything. He doesn't do anything differently based on what he knows. He just wants more. But the funny part is at the beginning, it was like you thought it was going to be about trauma, right? That he says like at 6 years old he sees all these visions, and then at 16 when his dad dies, he gave up on God, and you thought there was like some religious theme or like some themes about grieving.
Drew Barrymore was in this.
Oh, she was.
Interesting.
Margaret was one of the girls, the little kids.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? But I think it's interesting how it was like religious. It was like they had religious allegories or whatever, and then it didn't even end up like that at all.
Usually whenever I'm watching a movie like this, or really any movie, it's like I don't know that I necessarily try to see into the meaning until afterwards, and I try to just I try to take it as more literal initially and then see what kind of comes out of that. But I will say that I have to compliment this movie in that it is trying to tell a very ambitious story and perform very ambitious special effects for what it has to work with. Like it is,
You like practical effects.
yeah. Like I think that the concept of what this guy is trying to do, which is like effectively understand the human condition and to potentially see God through this type of experimentation, through the use of deprivation tanks, through the use of this drug that he gets from Mexico. I think it is what they're trying to do is pretty ambitious, but gosh, there were just so many things in here that were like literally laughable.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I can't even analyze it from like a even from the guise of a critic. I mean, to me, it just it doesn't it didn't age well, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like the effects are pretty goofy. I do think that about towards the tail end of the movie, when you're seeing this vision that he's having in the deprivation tank and she's rescuing him, is pretty interesting. Like it looked like the Big Bang is what it reminded me of. It did kind of. I mean, obviously, I think the thing that it looked most like initially was like an embryo and birth and conception, but it really looked a lot like the Big Bang, the start of the universe.
Yeah, they look cool.
I gotta say though that like the thing where it kind of fell off the rails for me was whenever he turns into a monkey. Like
Yeah.
it just, and maybe in 1980 that looked a lot more convincing, or maybe not. But at that point, I don't know if you felt like this, but it kind of felt like a movie from the 50s
Are
almost.
you thinking American Werewolf in London? Isn't that from?
Yeah,
is that-
yeah, like
that's
it kind of has that sort of like
yeah. That's what I was thinking. It just
and maybe that was intentional, but it really, like, even the way that people talked, it kind of had this sort of 40s 50s esque in New York sort of feel. And they were I think they were in San Francisco, and they had an accent, but it really felt like that whole sequence of the movie almost felt like a movie from a different era. It was, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, but that's where it really fell off the rails for me. Where it was just like, it just kind of got goofy.
I think the movie kind of had a good premise of like it had this really harsh imagery, again, like the religious undertones. I mean, not even undertones; they were just in your face, like the seven-eyed goat and him cutting its throat. And what else happened? There was like a couple like crosses.
I mean, there's a lot of like
revelation ties, like the
him
killing
him as Adam and Eve sharing a bite of something.
Oh, that's true. I didn't. Yeah. So all that stuff, and then he goes to Mexico. Gets married to this woman that he's known for 2 months, and then there's so much that happens, and they kind of span it out over the course of 15 years. But I think they nailed like his obsession down. I think that was obviously very apparent, and I like the characters in the story. I feel like they had like good, reasonable characters, especially his friend Mason. I think we both really liked his humor and his like he was just like very upfront, about everything. But yeah, I agree with the when he turns into the ape, it's because it does kind of like undermine it. It looks a little silly. It looks silly.
And maybe again, like this was in the 80s. This was 1980, like so right after the 79 and stuff, right after like 78, 79, those horror movies, and then into this. I don't think that there's any way for a man to pretend to be a monkey and it not look silly. Like
even in that era, you think?
I mean, I just don't think culturally I can see somebody pretending to be a monkey and it look convincing.
Yeah.
It just looks so ridiculous. And I don't know if that's something that for people like us who have seen that happen time and time again, if we feel that way again, like maybe at the time this came out it was like, whoa, like that's pretty convincing, but it will always to me look silly. And monkeys themselves are pretty silly creatures, and people trying to be them, it just does not really work. I don't know, like I thought that the effects of this movie were pretty ambitious. I thought that the one thing that I actually thought was really good was I thought the audio was really good.
Yeah,
I was kind of taken aback by like, wow, this sounds really good. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like the monkey scenes were just like they were just too much.
Yeah, I liked the couple. Yeah. Going back to like the beginning, I kind of like think of this film like from start to finish. And there's just so many different pieces that it's really hard to think. Like the start of the film kind of was like nothing. I would have never thought what happened at the end happened at the end. Like that was confusing in and of itself. I will give them props again for like the visual art of it. I would call it like an art piece. It kind of reminds me, we were talking about, it looks like The Fly. It's got body horror in it. It kind of goes on that lines. And, to go from like religious undertones, and then he's looking for a drug, and then it's like ritualistic. It's like there's these Indians in, Mexico. Yes, thank you. And, it just kind of goes from there, and you can kind of imagine, doing this ritual, and there's a lot of hallucinogenic and crazy visuals. And like the one that actually got me like kind of spooked was like, I mean, they had a lot of flashing images, and I honestly felt nauseated throughout. But the one visual that really caught me off guard and like kind of spooked me was like the image of like the dead lizard at the when he like wakes up, like its guts hanging out. And I don't know if that was real. You think it was a real lizard they did that? I mean, the like,
like yeah.
I don't know. It looked very real, and it just caught me off guard. Like, and the whole premise was that he became primal and ate this lizard's guts.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, I don't know. I think psychological horror, especially like in the the 80s, and I don't know. I'm gonna be honest. I don't watch a lot of films from the 80s, and I don't know. I don't want to like guess, but I feel like this would have been a lot spookier for people back then. Maybe because we're so desensitized to different psychological stuff in 2024. I mean, honestly, I don't know. It didn't hit me as hard as I was thinking it would, based on the premise.
Yeah, I thought that the couple things that I thought were going to come up but didn't seem to is there was a point where I was wondering if his hallucinations were becoming shared hallucinations, and maybe none of this stuff had been happening, but it was becoming these shared experiences that he was having with other people. It didn't seem like that was the case. It seemed like they were, I guess, like in a lot of ways, the most literal interpretation of the stuff that happened in this movie is what happened. Like,
Yeah.
there's no sort of lingering sense of like, well, maybe it was in his head and maybe it was in all their head, and which I think is like more typical of a movie today, that they would leave it a little ambiguous. I mean, I guess you could make the argument that sometimes that doesn't feel very committal. It feels a little safe to not really take a side one way or the other. But I really thought that there was going to be a point where it seemed as though he was having these hallucinations, and perhaps these were shared hallucinations, and none of this stuff was actually happening. The other thing that I thought was going to come up was I was thinking that characters like Mason were going to act as a more grounded character, in that they would help this person, they would help Ed see that, do you really feel like you're doing this for science, or do you feel like you're doing this for yourself? Because it didn't really seem like, these experiments that he's doing, there's not a whole lot of science-y stuff happening. It's like, we'll just hook this thing to your head. And I don't know, look at lines that are changing. And maybe that's...
I think at the beginning it maybe have tried that, and I would agree. It doesn't seem like they finished on a very... Yeah,
I mean, like, it seemed... that could have gone one of two ways, and I think it went the first way, which is, I think that they are just trying to convey to the audience that science stuff is happening. Don't worry about it, it's science stuff.
Yeah.
On the other hand, what I thought that they were going to dip into was like, hey, doesn't it look strange that they're not really gathering data like a scientist would? They're just sort of like pushing the extremes of these kinds of experiences. It almost like he's trying to justify these religious type experiences that he's having.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, I agree. I think the premise is just, it kind of gets mixed up with, I don't know. It doesn't hammer home. I think movies now are like almost rated higher if they leave you with a lingering thought. And this movie did not make me feel like that at all. I will not think about this movie. If I do, I will laugh. And I mean, because 90% of the bad stuff overshadows the 10% of the good. It is, the very end is comically ridiculous. It is crazy. She sees his arm shaking, and it's just like his illusion of he's physically changing. He changes and he touches her, and she turns into this lava person, and he's going through kind of what he went through earlier, like in the whirlpool. Like he was seeing life, but then he convinced himself to like come out of it, I guess. Like he was banging the door, and I guess that was his like fight with. And who's he fighting? Him? Is this just to me? It goes from it's fine. I mean, it goes from like being a very sciencey type thing to being like this guy's very selfish. But even still, how does his experience change anything? To me, like the X-rays that he took, and this radiologist was like, "Oh, this guy's he's a damn gorilla." It's like, don't you think someone would be like, "Wow, did you take an X-ray of a gorilla, dude, or did you take an X-ray of a person?" Like, why did that not impact the outside characters more?
There did seem to be a pretty big disconnect between the experiences these people had and their enthusiasm, and it's actually interesting. I wonder if it was intentional for this to happen, because after he turns into an ape and he starts attacking people, there's a scene where they are showing B footage until they get into the lab, and you see like a corpse being wheeled out on a gurney, and you see police officers, and it's like what they are doing is so insular, and it is like so disconnected from the rest of the world, and it feels like it would have to be a conscious choice that they did that. Mm-hmm. Like there wasn't at any point, you and I both had said this, there wasn't any point at which the guy Ed had woken up next to a dead goat, and a security guard found him, and they made any connection and said, well, this guy's just drunk. I guess we'll just keep him in the drunk tank until he's awake in the morning. Like they really didn't, like, there wasn't at any point at which the outside world had said, hey, we see what you're doing. You're doing weird stuff. There's weird stuff happening. You're clearly implicated in this. Mm-hmm. It feels like it's a conscious decision to separate those two things. Yeah. And I'd be curious to know why.
This is the 70s, man. Anything goes.
Yeah, no. they were just like, just like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. And in a lot of ways, I couldn't tell what the movie is trying to hand wave away as like, ignore this. It's right. Like it's an unimportant detail. You should be focused on this. And what things the director is saying, isn't that peculiar that we're not having the interaction between these two groups of people. Like mm-hmm. I find that very interesting.
Yeah, I think that's very it's just, I don't know. I agree. I think they do kind of hand wave, like you said. They hand wave certain aspects, and is that intentional? I don't know. It almost feels like the clues, like either the policemen that are there are so clueless. Like there were police reports of this man downstairs, this ape, sorry, and he kills somebody. Mm-hmm. And the same thing on all nights in Boston, something else very strange happens. They found a naked man eating a goat or a sheep's corpse. And
he's literally right next to it.
Yes, he's right next to it. So like there was a disturbance, and there was eyewitness footage or eyewitness testimony against this ape that, again, killed somebody and ran around. And he even verbalizes it. I went to the zoo. I went to the zoo with the wild pack of dogs, right?
Yeah.
I climbed the fence and I ate I ate warm, hot flesh of a sheep, and I was never happier in my life. It's like, how easy would it be to be like, dude, you just murdered somebody? But it's almost, I don't know, it almost like uses love as the plot armor again. Like she loved him so much and couldn't, she didn't want to see him go to prison. That's probably not the point, but I think that was just a testimony to her love for him. And it is so shallow. Like the way that it's described is so shallow. Like she loves him after 2 months. They have great sex. And, then she can't stop thinking about him. And I don't know if it's just like the weird, I think like mad scientists of the 70s, like were a thing. Like it kind of reminds me of like the visuals kind of remind me like Ghostbusters, like the original Ghostbusters kind of fell in there, like The Fly. Again, we talked about that. The Fly, like a mad scientist. I don't know. Did The Fly come out first? When was that? I think it was. Wasn't that 70 something?
Well, I mean, the original came out like in the 50s, right? But the
is there-
remake,
the Goldblum version. Well, okay, so
but
it's
the
not,
remake came out in 86.
I get okay. Okay. So you think it was trying to go for something like that? Do you think it was trying to emulate the original, The Fly?
I don't know about that. I mean, this was probably a common or like maybe a growing sort of style in the 80s.
Yeah.
And it's likely that they all kind of inspired each other.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I would say that those sorts of...
Again, the mad scientist. But again, that's kind of a trope. And I don't know if I'd call this a horror flick.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. Because it's like...
But again,
Would I call this a classic horror movie? Probably not. But I could see somebody calling it horror for a couple reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess I will have to give it some credit because like this happening early 80s, like literally 1980, is you probably have to give it some due credit of setting some trends for the movies that would come out later, like in that same decade, like 6 years before The Fly. I think that it is visually impressive for even today's time. I think they're doing some interesting stuff. But I gotta say, like, you know, the bit of like, well, maybe it was love all along. It literally is.
Yeah.
That is literally what they're doing.
Yeah, the last line of that movie.
Yeah.
I love you, Emily.
It just, you know, and it's not funny, I guess, but
It's
the
funny.
whole time, every time she'd be like, man, I love you, I want to get married, he'd be like, yeah, I know. Listen, I got dictations to do.
But have you heard? I'm a scientist.
Yeah,
Emily,
like-
I'm busy.
he is so wrapped up in his work, which I do think it works to his character. I
Yeah,
think it
yeah.
makes his character very convincing. I'll be honest, like, again, out of all the movies we've seen, I thought the acting was great in this movie.
I
Great.
think so. I think the actors were great. I think the character development is just like it's just like it was too linear. Like things didn't change that much. Like everyone's character stayed the same. Again, this is spanned over whatever 15 years, but I mean, again, I don't know if that's the point. I think it just kind of it wants you to feel one way about these characters, and it's a very, at least from like a story point, at least character wise, it's easy to swallow. Everything else was not. Like everything else was, the plot's confusing, the reasons why are confusing, the reasons why things didn't happen were confusing. What you see is confusing. I don't know.
I don't have a whole lot much else to really say about this. I guess to wrap up my thoughts, I don't think that I would rewatch this movie. I think that I really do think, and maybe somebody who is more well versed in this movie or is more of like a actual film critic would totally disagree, and that's fine. But I really feel like as you watch this movie, the most literal interpretation of what you're seeing on the screen is kind of what is happening.
Yeah.
Like,
Nothing more.
it is like, I'm sure there's a little bit. I'm sure if you really wanted to like reach, you could probably find things to point out and some symbolism here and there. But I mean, for me, I felt like that's not necessarily what it was going for. It was like, this man is exploring some altered states of consciousness, and it begins manifesting in his real life. It affects his relationships. He becomes a literal monster and is literally terrorizing the community that he lives in. Like, I feel like it is very literal. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think rewatching this would yield, at least for me, any new perspectives on this. I thought it was worth watching as a movie that is like, you know, I think if you're like, hey, show me the inspirations that movies later in the 80s would draw.
Yeah, I could totally see that. And I think maybe that's why it gets a lot of good reviews. At least that's what I think maybe. But
I think it's also I think it's unfair for me to also say, wow, this movie made 44 years ago it doesn't hold up. It's like, well, I don't know that the director was thinking it would hold up quite that well.
I guess I was thinking about my comments about aging well, but I mean, as a film of I don't know, I think in some ways it still doesn't hold up to, and not again. It's a movie for the ages. It's a movie for its time, and again, I think it's just entertainment value.
Yeah, I mean, like I think that, nearly half a century of, I don't know that many movies will stand up to that test of time, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't rewatch it. I thought it was worth watching. I won't say I was particularly in love with this movie, but I thought it was at least something radically different from some of the stuff we'd seen.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, my thoughts are pretty similar. I think the only thing I'd say is differently is that, differently, I guess. But my take is this film, if you, at least for present day and age, like this film is good if you are into like 80s movies. But for the average film watcher, you won't like it.
You would, I mean, this isn't a movie that you could be like watch with your parents or your in-laws. It is very inaccessible.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. Like I think that it is a challenging watch.
Yeah, I think visually, especially like in the beginning, and you can kind of see like the imagery is like it flashes, and then once he hones in on his ability to concentrate and alter his state, right? It becomes more fluid, and that's why you can see more pronounced and longer images. I think that's kind of what there was some talk about, using that chamber as like a way to like make it more concentrated and make it more fluid and less like jump. But my point is like the visuals. I told Aaron that this is the first movie that honestly made me feel like I was about to throw up. Like, and I'm like, gore doesn't bother me. Like, that kind of stuff. Like, blood, guts. I don't really care. But like, the visuals make me nauseated. I thought I was going to get sick. Like, it is so flashing.
Yeah.
So, but like I said, I'll reiterate, a great movie if you love 80s films. But man, for the average viewer, it's a hard watch.
I also don't think. It would take a lot of money for me to spend more than half an hour in a deprivation chamber.
Yeah.
I don't think that I could ever do that.
Yeah, I think I would get in there for maybe 5 seconds. I said 30 seconds, but I don't know if I could last 30. That is very isolating and strange.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a gigantic coffin. And there's like electrodes in there. It's like every imaginable bad situation. Like there's electricity in there. It's dark. You're floating in water. Like, it's just, I cannot even fathom that this guy seemed to love it. So, hey, more power to him.
All right, Aaron, play us out.
All right. Here we go to the movie show.